Well, hello again, and thanks for everyone for joining us on the latest stage in our journey of having decided to live 120 years. We are so glad that you are a part of this, and for those that have been with us, you'll know that we've been talking with people who have made the decision to change their lives, who have made a decision to prepare themselves to live their lives as fully as they can, and hopefully that they will prepare themselves to live to be 120 years. We're learning about how people have made those decisions, why they've made it, and what the impact has. And I tell you, I cannot be more excited by our guest today. Our guest is just terrific, and this is somebody that I have known for a while now and have been a student of and learned from, and that is our colleague, Dave Beal. Dave is the Executive Program Director and Head National Trainer for Brain Power Wellness and the author of a new book, The Brain Power Classroom. We're going to talk to him about his professional perspectives, but also about his personal experiences on this topic that are so central to Ilchi Lee's book, I've Decided to Live 120 Years. Welcome, Dave, and how are you doing today?
Reed, thank you so much for having me. Doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Great. You look fit and happy and content, and I can see your life is moving just as it should.
Oh, right back at you. Yeah, every day, trying to be a little better each day.
Thank you. Well, we're going to talk about brain education today, and we're going to talk about this incredible multi-system organ that we call the brain. This thing in our heads that weighs about 3 pounds, represents about 2% of our total body weight, has something like 100 billion neurons and 40,000 synapses or connections, and has extraordinary complexity. But what I think a lot of people don't realize or take for granted is that we can impact how well our brains function, and we can use our brains to give us a better chance for healthiness. So let me ask you this reaction to a very important comment in Ilchi Lee's book, and let me see what you think about it. He says that asking ourselves who we really are, searching for an answer to that question, and becoming our true selves, this is really our greatest task in life and the greatest motivation we can give our brains. A life of completion through which we can fully realize our absolute value is the greatest dream and hope we can have in our old age. Our brains are prepared to perfectly support our journey toward completion. Anyone can experience completion as long as they maintain the will and the passion to head toward that goal, and the humility and gratitude to learn and grow from that experience. Would you share with us a little bit about how you began your own personal journey towards completion?
That's a beautiful passage that you shared. And I think you hit it on the head with the terminology true self that Ilchi Lee uses frequently. And when we are able to tap into our true nature, our heart opens, our motivation opens, and we can unlock that potential of that amazing 3-pound organ that you described. So for me, I think like so many others, I started learning about this process of completion and this training, set of principles and practice and training methods when I really needed them. So I guess I learned about this when I was in my mid-20s. I had just had, my son was about 2 years old at the time, so I was a brand new father. And I had just started a new position as a teacher in New York City. And I was teaching in the 5th lowest performing school in the entire city out of 2,000 schools. I was brought in similar to Teach for America. There's a program in New York City called Teaching Fellows. And so they place you in challenging schools. And I was placed in a very difficult school in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And so I was introduced to a lot of amazing people, a lot of amazing experiences, but also some new stressors that I wasn't fully prepared for. And so I learned very quickly about that I kind of wasn't 100% prepared for that level of stress that I was under as a new father and still going to graduate school and then in this kind of challenging environment. So I think it's safe to say I felt pretty disconnected from my true self at that time. and was kind of caught up in the stress of day-to-day responsibilities. And so my health, like so many of us, my health started to suffer, even in my 20s. So I started getting headaches most days. I couldn't sleep well. And when I started getting chest pain, that was very scary for me. Um, and I shared that with my wife, and my wife, the story I like to tell, she may say it's a little different, but she looked at me and she looked at our 2-year-old son, and she said to me, if you die, I'm gonna kill you. That was her line. So she really cared about me, and she wanted me to be here for the long haul. So she encouraged me to start taking yoga, meditating, learning relaxation techniques so that I could handle my stress better.
Let me make sure. Let me just ask you, as you tell that story, which is fascinating, had you previous to this been a seeker, someone who was connected to their spirituality, or was this really a significant life decision that altered your life in a dramatic way, that this guidance and cajoling from your loving wife?
That's right. I think I would have described myself at that time as sort of a spiritual agnostic. So someone who had a lot of respect for people who engaged in spiritual practices. But for me personally, I had not found any kind of tradition or set of principles or practices that resonated with me. And my mindset at that time was much more focused on the material world, not so much in terms of trying to accumulate wealth, but in terms of trying to change the social structures that I saw around us. So I was much more involved in trying to activate myself to try to make an impact socially and politically and things of that nature. So I was not that attuned, I think, to my spiritual nature at that time.
Something serious inside of you that would make a young person who's clearly intelligent, clearly has a lot of self-initiative, to decide to take on the hard work of devoting themselves to an inner city school with all of those challenges. As you look back at that year, because so much of what we're doing here, Dave, and I know this is stuff that you're passionate about, is trying to better understand how we inspire everyone, no matter what age they are, to sort of make that choice. But there's something that, as you look back in you, that was calling you to some kind of service larger than your own self-concerns.
100%. And I think, like most of us, and again, it comes back to, even if I wasn't in touch with my true self in a spiritual way, and I still had that yearning to, and I think we all do, right? We have that yearning to be part of something bigger than ourselves and to have an impact on our world. So since I was little, I had that desire, and I always wanted to be part of something, part of a movement to change things. And so I was a union organizer. I was trying to help folks in the inner city in Baltimore organize around their wages and unfair working conditions, and kind of protesting about racial discrimination or these kind of huge topics, the military industrial complex, these kind of very big topics, but without a set of tools that I could kind of manage my stress levels and connect with my inner self, and also to connect with some sort of peace of mind that these efforts were not in vain. I just started getting really burned out very quickly.
and then all of a sudden the universe sends you this angel called your wife. And you to change. And so what were the next steps then that you decided to you based upon her helpful support?
Right. So her very quiet and loving support, she encouraged me to, to start taking yoga, Tai Chi. I started learning meditation techniques and relaxation techniques, very, similar to what is outlined in Mr. Lee's book. And just started to manage my stress in a different way. And I took to it really, I think, pretty quickly. So I just loved the way that I felt. So I started feeling stronger than I'd felt before, more energized, and just, just as you get out of the rut of the day to day, like you just feel so much brighter inside. And so, I just started wanting to share that. So it helped all phases of my life. I felt like I was a better husband, a better father. And then, in the challenging environment in the school that I was in, I was more patient, I was more loving, I was more creative, and just overall more hopeful about the impact that I could have in a positive way on my students.
And so then as you learn the techniques and the philosophy around brain education, you decided then to go ahead and put that into practice in the schools. And that must have been very difficult, because I would imagine that many of the bureaucrats who run our schools, well-intentioned people, I'm sure, yeah, but must have been going, well, wait a minute now, to be able to get involved in the brains of our young people. I don't know whether we're prepared to allow this well-meaning young Dave Beal to come in and do that. How did you convince them?
Right. That's a great question. And so we have to also remember, and we find ourselves now in 2019, where you see, every magazine is talking about the brain or talking about mindfulness or meditation, and corporations and schools it have all adopted these methods, and it's pretty mainstream now, which is a fantastic thing. And we have a million different apps that we can use to take a brain break and things of that nature. In 2002, it wasn't really like that. This was George W. Bush time in the education world. And so we had just passed No Child Left Behind, which, you can argue about the merits of it, but it was a very test-based system, standards-based system, focused on, in my view, a very narrow perspective of education, focusing on standardized testing as the kind of end all and be all of promotion from grade to grade. And so there was a tremendous amount of pressure put on teachers and students and parents for the students to improve their scores on these tests. And in the school that I came into, when I mentioned we were the 5th lowest performing school in the city, that's a really big deal. It was a very dire situation where more than 90% of the students in that school were in the lowest level. There's a 4-tier system. There's level 1, level 2, 3, and 4. 1 means you're far below grade level. That was where most of my students entered when I was teaching 5th grade. And so there was not a lot of room in this kind of, I would argue, kind of fear-based approach to education. There wasn't a lot of room for this outside-the-box thinking. So I've never been one to just follow rules that didn't make sense to me. So I knew that this would, I knew that there was a connection between my students' emotional health, my students' physical health, and my students' academic performance. I just knew. I didn't need a scientist to tell me that. I knew that in your expression, I'll borrow your expression, Dr. Reed, in my bones. In my bones, I could feel that there was this connection. And so I was a non-tenured teacher. I was a new teacher. So I did not ask permission. They say it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission sometimes. So I paid my own money and took a workshop that was given in my hometown on brain education, on these methods that are outlined in the 120 book. And I started studying that, and I brought that into my classroom. I closed my door and I would do the exercises with my kids. And I saw a tremendous change. Just tremendous change, to the point where my principal came to me and she said, "What happened to your students?" Because as the only male teacher in 5th grade, I was given all the boys. I had mostly boys that the other teachers didn't want, to be frank, in their class. And they were very prone to fighting and causing trouble. And all, everybody knew my students in the lunchroom, in the cafe, outside on recess. They were often in trouble. And that stopped, right? And so she came to me and said, "What happened?" And then I said, "Well, come in and we'll let the kids show you." And they taught her, about 20-minute demo of these exercises. and she
All right.
changed her mind completely. And from there, they say the rest is history. Then that inspired me to continue learning
What
about
a
this.
great, great story. As we
Mm,
continue this story, I want to zero in on something that you talked, a phrase you used, which is very important. And that was the education system was fear-based in so many ways. And no matter whether we're talking about young people, middle-aged people, or seniors who are deciding to make a change in their life to live 120 years, so many of us base our life and our decisions around our life based on fear. And that's
mm,
a really sad reality of life. Ilchi Lee, in his book, says that one thing stands above all factors as necessary for optimal brain health, and that's hope.
mm.
How do you understand this sense of moving from a fear based world to a world that is organized around hope and positivism?
Yeah. I absolutely love that, and I think that's what really drew me to this practice and this movement. So I think it works on both the individual and the collective level. When we start to feel hope that we can make changes in ourselves, those changes become much more likely to take place, right? I mean, if we psych ourselves out and we say, I'm going to try this New Year's resolution. I'm going to try to lose weight, or I'm going to try to quit smoking, or I'm going to try to be more patient. But, I've tried it so many times. We'll see what happens, right? If we have that approach, there's no way we're going to be successful. We're not going to be able to change those ingrained habits in our brains, right? We have to have conviction. We have to have hope that we have the ability to change. And so as I started learning about the brain, through this very activist-based approach, I would say. So this is not a typical kind of neuroscience kind of spectator approach. So Ilchi Lee has a very clear intent here that we want to learn about the brain in order to activate our potential. Why? Because we want to make the changes necessary in our life, and then to broaden that collectively in our society and our world. And that just touched me like right away. And when I heard about the Earth Citizen movement and creating, having 100 million people worldwide who wanted to kind of, devote a lot of their time and energy to creating a better world, I right away, I thought, just sign me up for that, because that's what I've been looking for. Through the political system, through social activism, through teaching in a kind of standard and traditional environment, and feeling the confines of that environment, and feeling the limitation of trying to change legislation and that kind of thing. And then realizing that, to come back to hope, realizing when we can inspire people that they can live healthier lives, that they can be happier, that they can, make those changes, then we can start to deal with these bigger social issues, and we can realize that we're more the same than we are different.
Oh, that's such
When
a point.
Yeah, so that actually so when you talk about hope, that is why I do what I do, because what I realized very quickly was arguing with people, debating and fighting. I mean, you turn on like cable news, you just got people yelling at each other. I don't feel much hope there. I don't feel that either person is going to say, you know what? Actually, now that you've said it 18 times and yelled at me, I kind of believe, I kind of want to change my opinion, and I want to follow what you're saying. It
Well,
doesn't work that way, right?
you're an example that you described. You in terms of the movement that you talk about in terms of being part of movement, the Earth Citizen movement.
Yeah.
That sort of dovetails nicely in terms of the progression that Ilchi Lee wants us to, I think, look at through his book. He says, first, you've got to have hope, but then
Yeah.
we have to translate hope into goals and a sense of purpose. So we take the hope energy and we translate that into things. I was really impressed by a story that's in the book, where a very challenged community in San Salvador, really where it was heavily involved in drug abuse, violence, gang warfare, and they incorporated brain education. And what they found was violence and drug use decreased, and positive changes occurred in the self-regulation of the young people and their relationships. I wonder how you have found the ability to go with the young people that you're working with, to have them go from the hope that you're instilling into actually having them believe that there is some concept of the possibility of a meaningful future for themselves, and that they can array goals and objectives with their progression. How is that happening for you?
Yeah, yeah. No, that the El Salvador story is incredibly inspiring, and I'd like to share a similar kind of tangential story in the U.S. as well. So in 2015, this is about 8 or 9 years after I made the decision to leave the classroom and to do this full time, and I was able to become the director of this organization and work with a number of schools. We met a district in the South Bronx in New York City, which is the poorest socioeconomic neighborhood in the Bronx, or in New York City. We met the superintendent of this district, and she was a wonderful woman named Yolanda Torres, who now has been promoted to an even higher position in the Department of Ed. But she took note of some of the work we were doing in some of her schools in her district, and she asked me to write a proposal to work with the most challenged subset of students in her district. So we did, and we worked with 180 of the most at-risk middle school kids. So these are kids 12 to 14 years old, many of whom are very close to dropping out of school, are performing at very low standards, have high rates of absenteeism, drug abuse, gang-related activities, a host of issues. And so we worked with those 180 kids from 6 different schools. And every week we visited 3 times. We did regular classes with them. We provided a 2-day leadership experience for them, which was very, very powerful. And after 2 months, we found from their own self-reporting, they had a kind of a psychological survey that we gave them before and after the training. They were able to lower their negative indicators, such as hyperactivity, conduct problems, fighting, emotional symptoms, lower those things by 67%.
Wow.
And they were able to increase their pro-social behavior, their empathy, their compassion, their kindness by 50%.
Wow.
So that was very, very powerful. And that actually, that data actually made its way to the chancellor of New York City. And then she kind of opened the door for us to work with other districts, and that's helped us now to work with about 400 schools, because they want the same thing, right? They want that social emotional health for their students.
Well, Dave, that's just exciting. So let's talk a little bit now and get into some of the details on brain education. And as we do, I mentioned earlier just how complex this structure that we call the brain is. But I think you sort of look at the brain and you divide it into 3 key areas. Would you just describe sort of the 3 big ways in which you sort of divide this complex thing that we call brain?
Sure. So when most of us think about the brain, we're actually thinking of the neocortex, right, which is our thinking brain. And a lot of us are familiar with the right and left hemispheres and things of that nature. But still, we're mostly focusing on the brain as an analytical tool, right, to understand our world. And that is obviously a huge function of the brain. But the other 2 main layers of the brain are also extremely important. So we have the limbic system, which is our emotional regulation and emotional wellness. And then the brain stem, the deepest part of the brain, regulates our physical activity and our life functions, right? Our breathing, even on a subconscious level, our breathing, our respiration, our blood pressure, etc. And so in this practice, we talk about integrating those 3 layers, right? So we want physical health, right? So we want to have a healthy brainstem and healthy organs and good circulation and of energy throughout our body. Obviously, our emotional health through the limbic system. We want to kind of cleanse the negative habits and preconceptions about ourselves and limiting belief systems and create more positive frameworks for success. And then, of course, we want our amazing neocortex to work at its optimal level so we can plan and be creative and come up with ideas and problem solve and things of that nature. And so what I love about the system that's laid out in the 120 book is, we have to have a purpose, I think, for doing that, right? We have to have, so to circle back to you're talking about hope, right? We have to have a reason. Why do I want to go through this training and exercise and, try all these things that are pretty challenging, right? And if I have that goal, if I have, hope for something that I want to create, then I can actualize my potential through my physical health, my emotional health, and through my
I
cognitive.
think you really laid this out very well. And I will attest from my own personal experience, from my own training and my
Mm,
own goals, that this notion of integrating the various parts of who and what I am into a consistent whole, a one whole that flows from piece to piece it has its own integrity as a complete entity, has been one of the most enjoyable things that I have ever experienced in my life, and one of the most meaningful. So we're going to talk now about some of the specific elements of this 5-point strategy of brain education. Let me say to our listeners, at the end of the show, we will put up a slide that will tell you how you can find out more information, because obviously in the time we have today, we won't be able to cover everything in great detail. We're just going to touch on some of the major points. But again, we're not going to abandon you, dear audience. You're walking this journey with us, and so we'll help you to find ways that you can learn more. Can I ask my colleagues to put the slide up on the specifics of brain education, and just so that we can show people that we've got these 5 major areas. We've got brain sensitizing, brain versatalizing, brain refreshing, brain integrating, and brain mastering. And so these are the 5 elements of what Dave has been teaching to young people. And Dave has also been inspiring teachers who are talking to us in middle life, and people like me who are, seniors in life. And each of us can find something important in each of these elements. And so thank you for that slide. And let's start now, Dave, with brain sensitizing. What is brain sensitizing all about?
Sure. So that's the way that we're basically connecting our brain with our body. So there's a lot of physical exercise involved through yoga and stretching and breathing and body tapping, things to literally to sensitize, to make us more aware of what's happening in the body. And then the energy ball meditation that we do in this practice is also an example of that, kind of highest brain sensitizing activity, where if your senses are attuned, if your brain is connected to your body, you're able to be aware of the flow of energy in your body. So it's kind of bringing your mind back into your body so you can start to heal yourself.
Sometimes, when people talk in society about, being in the moment, I've certainly found that by doing very simple things, like, as you mentioned, tapping, being in touch with my body, tapping around and paying attention to the feeling, that moment that my finger just starts to touch my body, and being there in that instant.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all the stresses of the nonsense going on around me disappear. Yeah. And I note that I'm in the moment. And something as simple as just touching my body over and over again and being in the moment. Have you found that to be your experience as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think one obstacle to meditation and mindfulness in many people's minds is they feel like, well, I just can't quiet my mind. I just can't sit down and start to meditate. And I'm the same way. And so what I love about this approach is it's more dynamic than that, right? So before we engage with either children or adults or seniors or everyone, before we start a meditation or a mindfulness activity, first we start to loosen up through the body, and we'll do some stretching to kind of feel your body a little bit more deeply, as you mentioned, tapping exercise. And through that rhythm, right, creating rhythm, creating vibration, it kind of forces your mind into your body. So all the extraneous thoughts kind of start to kind of dissipate out, and you just start to tune back in to your body and to your breathing. So yeah, that's certainly been my experience too.
And you then mentioned this energy ball, and let's just sort of make sure that this is one that I think we should make sure that all of our listeners, especially newcomers to this, something that you can do anywhere, anytime. And that's that idea of holding your hands apart and just feeling the energy between your palms, between your fingertips, and moving in and out slowly, And I mean, I can just now, as I'm talking to you,
Mhm.
find that I'm so much more relaxed already because I can feel this energy between me. And I'm
Yeah.
certainly at that moment, in the moment once again.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. And so for students, for younger kids, but actually even for adults too, who are familiar with anime, like kind of cartoons that originated in Japan and China and Korea, things like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto or Pokemon. The kids love this concept of like shooting energy and that kind of thing. And so if you can add that visualization, I find it's also very helpful for beginners who haven't been able to feel that yet. But just kind of initiating, it's almost like a placebo effect, kind of envisioning the color of the energy ball, or kind of just basically telling yourself, no, there's energy there, and then just allowing yourself that opportunity to feel it. It's
And
amazing.
that's
And
the actual reality is the energy is there. It's not something
100,
you're making
yeah,
up. It's being
that's right. No,
interpreted.
if the energy's not there, then we're not able to have the conversation, right? We're not here. Absolutely. So it's
Let's
kind of
move to
quiet.
the,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm
It's just
sorry.
quieting. No, I'm sorry. I was saying it's just quieting all the distractions that keep you from feeling that. And
That's
so
a,
when you feel that, as you mentioned, then you know that you're here. You're here and you're
you're here and now, and it doesn't take any money. Don't have to
now.
be in
Right.
a special place. It's just right there, right this second. So by the way, if you want, if you're as one of our listeners and viewers, you
Mm.
can stop this and go sit down right now and go ahead and feel that energy. We won't mind as long as you come back. Let's talk now about brain versatilizing. Now that's an unusual concept. What could that mean?
Yeah, so it's an interesting word, and so I typically will ask the students what's the root of that word, and they say versatile, right? And so it's about introducing flexibility into our circuitry, and there's a number of ways to do that. The most simple ways are again using the body. So we have a lot of our brain games where we'll tap or sweep using the different parts of the body, or a very famous exercise in our community is the pinky thumb, where we're changing from one hand to the other to integrate the left and right hemispheres. But when you first learn a new exercise like that, you can feel how fixed that part of your brain is, and you can just kind of feel like, oh my gosh, what it's, and through the process of breathing out, smiling, positive self-talk, just continuing to try and to be resilient, eventually you get it. And then you create that new synapse, and then it's very easy. And then it's time to learn a new one, right? So there are hundreds, if not infinite, brain versatilizing exercises that kind of force you to integrate the two hemispheres of the brain in a new way.
And I find that when I do this, it opens up my thinking because it forces. So if I'm trying to tap with one hand and sweep with the other,
Yeah.
or I'm doing these exercises that you did,
Yeah.
it does two things for me. Number one, it seems that my conceptual ideas become more creative because I'm thinking or using my brain in ways that I had not used it before.
Yeah.
And the second thing I think for those seniors out there who are watching the show is, we do all kinds of Sudoku exercises and puzzles, things to keep our brain sharp, which are great. And then we hope that
Yeah.
people will continue to do that. But what a great thing to try to draw a triangle with one hand and a square with the other. And it really, they're fun games to play, but they have great power over us, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And then what I think also is equally important is the mindset. So Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, is incredibly popular in education and business and sports and really throughout society. And it's very simple, that trying to help us to move from a fixed mindset, right, where we're used to doing things a certain way, to a growth mindset, where we're embracing change and transformation. So as we age, that is a transformative experience. And if we try to hold on to the way that we think and the way that our body behaves when we're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, it can be a very frustrating experience and a fearful experience. So I think just embracing with a positive attitude, embracing the change and having that positive self-talk and that resilient mindset, I think that's actually the biggest benefit, I think, from brain
Well,
versatilizer.
that's a really refreshing idea. And guess that leads me to the third element.
I see what you did there. All right.
Very refreshing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the third step is brain refreshing, which is managing the quality of our thoughts and our emotions. So trying to clean out the garbage, if you will. So the first thing is kind of identifying what my emotional patterns and habits are, and then seeing how I can kind of release the negative emotions that aren't serving me well, and to try to embrace a more positive mindset that is more likely to help me succeed.
This I found, once I had gone through each of the stages you talked about, I was very open to this, and I realized, Dave, like so many people, that I was holding on to so much anger, so many
Mm.
resentments. And I felt, quite frankly, entitled to my outrage because
Hmm.
they were legitimate things to be upset about, I thought. So I can prove in a court of law that these bad things had happened to me, and I had a right to be upset. Well, it wasn't helping me very much to live a better life. And
Right.
eventually I had to learn and make a decision that I'm going to let things go. I'm going to release. I'm going to accept things. And I'm going to also forgive and
Yeah.
approach the world with more gratitude. In your
Yeah.
own life, how have you found this principle working for you?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's very powerful sharing. And I mean, if you look at y- y- parts of our society where people have been subjugated, have been discriminated against, have very legitimate, um, gripes about histories of oppression and things of that nature, the health of that section of the population tends to be worse, right? Because they have all of this stress. And so kind of holding on to that, somewhat, Martin Luther King Jr. would call it righteous indignation, right? Holding on to that indignation can be very toxic, right? So if it motivates us to change our situation, and we utilize the emotions of anger and outrage and frustration, if we can use it as a motivating force in our lives, then I think it can serve its purpose. But if we hold on to it and allow that toxicity just to stay inside our system, it's going to damage our liver, our kidneys. It's going to create stress. And you look at the number one killer in our country is heart attacks, is heart disease, because we're holding on to that frustration and not releasing it.
That's
And I shared in my 20s, I already had that. I already had chest pain, so I was certainly doing that, even not even me personally representing a marginalized group in society, but just growing up in the South, and seeing all of the injustice that was part of our social fabric, and wanting to do something about it. I also felt, even though I didn't personally experience some of that oppression, I still felt like I don't want to smile, right? Because you need to know how serious things are. And, oh, you're happy right now? Well, let me tell you about what just happened in this city, or this. And I realized, like you just mentioned, it wasn't helping me live a better life. It wasn't helping me empower myself. It certainly wasn't helping me inspire my students to be better people and to change their outcome and their trajectories. Um,
very early in
yeah.
my journey, Dave. I remember railing about some outrage or another at length, and then one of my spiritual partners turned to me very quiet and said, "So how's that working for you?" It sort of, I came to a screeching halt. Another one of our guests in an earlier show, talked about having this sense of hate and resentment is a poison that
Right.
we inject in ourselves as
Yeah.
we try to hurt someone else. And the
That's
only
right.
person that gets hurt is ourselves.
That's right. It's like, I guess the Buddha has the famous analogy of picking up a hot stone to throw it at someone, and you're the first one that gets burned. So it's really true, that we have to, even from a selfish standpoint, even if we don't care about improving, outside of my own personal health and well-being, just from a selfish standpoint, for my own health, I should let these things go, right? I should let it go. And then as you start to let it go, then you want to help other people do that too. And you kind of start to open up and realize that it's not possible for me to be 100% healthy and happy if I'm living in a society that's not that way, right? So then I think, just, we're kind of pre-programmed, I think, as social creatures to want to share this kind of brain refreshing with other people around us, right? So that we can collectively create healthier, structures in our lives that we can all benefit from.
That's terrific.
Real quick
Yeah.
story. Can I give you a quick story
Oh,
on a little
sure,
anecdote
absolutely.
on this? So, what inspired me to do the work that I'm doing now is actually a brain refreshing story. So,
Oh,
I'll give you the 30-second version here. So, I'm teaching 5th grade in Brooklyn. I just had started to teach the brain power curriculum to my kids. They just started to embrace it. And part of the exercises every day were push-ups. And my boys, who had a lot of anger and a lot of aggression, we would use push-ups and meditation as a way to release the negative and to embrace the positive. And so we were coming back from lunch one day, and these 2 boys bumped into each other. They got embarrassed, they pushed each other, and they were about to fight. And I got in between them just in time, and I just said, push-ups. That's all I said. And they knew what that meant because we did it every day in class. They dropped to the floor. They're doing their push-ups, right? Opening up their chest, breathing heavy, doing as many as they can. And within 1 minute of doing as many push-ups as they could, they forgot that they wanted to fight each other, right? So they did many push-ups as they could. They both jumped up. They did 50, which was their goal. They both jumped up, and they were so excited that they did 50 push-ups, they hugged each other. They dapped each other up. And then they realized as they're hugging, oh, wait, I'm supposed to fight this guy. And they both recoiled, and they realized that neither one was mad again. And then they hugged each other again. And that took 1 minute, Reed. And in that 1 minute, these kids taught me all about brain sensitizing through brain refreshing, that using their body, they were able to expel that negative, all those negative cortisol and adrenaline and all that anger was able to be out in 1 minute. And then once that's gone, their true self says, I don't want to hurt this guy. This is my friend. I was just mad in that moment. So they changed their energy, they hugged each other, and it was all good. And that was
I'm so
like,
glad you shared that.
if these guys can do that, what can, that gives me hope for our world.
And so make sure then that everyone watching us today, you can stop for a minute, breathe quietly, and decide today's the day. Let go. And if you want an example of how do you translate your social commitment and concern into positivism without harming yourself, we have the great example of Ilchi Lee himself and what he does in the book. And then there's Gandhi. What a perfect example. I've been reading his biography of late and really inspired. Well, let's, in the time we have left, quickly touch on the last 2. And next one is brain integrating. And you mentioned earlier this sense of the 3 parts of our brain sort of coming together. And is that what this really is all about, this brain integrating?
It is. And so through, this is a little deeper level of training that typically will involve like a lot of vibration exercise, something that gets us out of our logical brain and literally brings our focus inward to the brainstem. And when we're in that very quiet kind of healing space, we're able to feel all of our being, our physical power, our emotional power, our spiritual power, our intellectual power is geared towards achieving this goal of is coming from my true self. So it's not coming from the outside world or my judgments or my preconceptions. It's literally coming from my conscience, from my pure essence. And then that's very powerful for us. And so one of the simplest kinds of experiences that is chronicled in the 120 book and other books from Mr. Lee is about the self-declaration exercise, kind of knowing who I am and organizing all of my mental, emotional, and physical faculties to support that very powerful affirmation of who I am and what I want to accomplish on this earth.
Terrific. And then finally, there's brain mastering. And this addresses the entire brain. And it's the sort of the final step for learning how to intentionally employ our brain's core functioning. How do you sort of talk about and help our audience to understand brain mastering?
Yeah, I think it's it's just a daily continuous practice of steps 1 through 4, kind of in challenging myself continuously. And the key component of brain mastery is purpose, really touching on my purpose. If I have a vibrant life purpose, then I'm going to continuously practice, and I'm going to go through all the struggle and challenge and embrace that challenge as my growth. If I lose sight of that purpose, then I'm going to start to kind of fall into my emotions and that kind of thing. So I think that the key to living a life of mastery for all of us is to hold on to that dream and that bigger purpose that inspires us.
Well, that's just a great way for us to sort of end up, because I think this brain mastery thing, what I've been taught to do and use it regularly, is to sort of do a vision meditation. Well, I look at the mind screen of my mind, this canvas, and I paint a picture on it. And I want to end with a quote in this kind of regard for how do we feed our brains positive information that allows us and it motivates us to do well, and to see what what it might mean for you. But Ilchi says this about a message that he gives his brain every day. And his message to himself is, I'm overflowing with a life force that will allow me to live to 120. I'm filled with the energy of infinite love and creation. I will complete the earth village as I live to 120 in health and happiness. So he's feeding his brain every day this positive message that allows him to have the energy, the hope, the goals, the purposes to move forward. Do you have a similar kind of affirmation that you're using in your life?
Well, it's going to pale in comparison to the beauty of what you just read. So I say one affirmation that I say that's very simple that we teach in this practice in brain power with our students is that my brain loves challenges. And that's very simple. This on its face, it's very simple. But just as you shared in that quote about Ilchi Lee's vision of creating the Earth Village, which is a huge international undertaking, in my own life, my personal vision is not that grand, but it is very challenging for me. So my personal vision is to expand brain power wellness to all 1.1 million students in New York City, and then to all of the students throughout the United States. And so that vision gives me a lot of inspiration and a lot of drive, so that I can't get caught up in my day-to-day struggles. I have to say, okay, I'm embracing this struggle because my brain loves challenges. Why? Because I want to grow as an individual, but also because if I'm going to be the director of this, if I'm going to be a leader of this movement, I have to change. I have to grow. I have to. So when these new obstacles come and these new headaches come for problems that I never could even see coming, instead of wasting time and energy complaining, I try to just tell myself, okay, I asked for this. I asked for this new challenge, right? So let me embrace it. Let me love it, and then I'm going to learn what I'm really made of, and then I can kind of go to the next step of this journey.
Dave Beal, you have a beautiful affirmation, and I will just tell you, my friend, you are a gift to the students and children of New York City, and you're a gift to the world. I think that no matter what age people are who have heard you today, whether you're a young person making choices about how they're going to live their life, as you did when you were at a critical stage in your life, whether you're now a more mature man who has family responsibilities and teaching and administrative responsibility, you continue to make a choice every day. And whether you're someone my age who now is inspired to try to dig deeper into the elements of brain education so that my life can be more full and more beautiful. All of us are benefiting from hearing you today. So my friend, I thank you so very much for joining us. You are great. And I'll see you down the road for sure.
Absolutely. Dr. Reed, thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much for the time and for having me. And I look forward to seeing you very soon.
All right. And for those in our audience, we are going to continue to walk down this road and have this journey, and we want you to be with us. And we want to make sure that we are walking in directions that you want us to walk in. So please contact us, and you can see on the screen the different ways that you can reach us. If you have questions, suggestions, ideas, whatever it takes for us to do a better job of serving you, because that's what we are. We are your servants in this exercise. See you next time. Everyone, take care, and thanks for joining. Bye-bye, everybody.